Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with the world-renowned J. Chester Armstrong, aka we call him Skip, and we're going to look at his latest piece. But before we look at his latest piece, he's going to tell us a little bit about this one right here.
Yeah, Jack, this is a piece that was done for a client who's a big-time hunter. Now, I don't want to be the guy saying yes or no for hunting. It's just people's choice, but I personally love to create life, not death. And in this case, I did the big slam, the grand slam for him, which is the four different bighorn sheep that exist in the world. And the whole intent of this piece is to separate in one piece four distinct types of sheep. And I gave each one the context that they live in. And so starting from the top, I created the Dell sheep, which is Northwest Territories in Alaska. And as that sheep is blonde and the background is white for the snow, we kind of created that little sequence there, if you will, a vignette of their world is started with that piece. Then you jump over to this section here, and this is Northwest Territories sheep, and it's half white, half brown. So in that case, we're good. And then down here, we've got, of course, the Rocky Mountain bighorns with the Rocky Mountains behind them. And the desert bighorns there, and you can tell that's the desert by the cactus that is surrounding. So the whole intent of this is to create one piece with four separate sheeps depicted, and I think I really did well.
That is incredible.
Here the job was to isolate out the groups and give them their own context, which is different from my normal relief work, which is one image and unify it and make it move off the page. So this is pretty unique. And
I'd say
again, it's the grand
I'd say
slam.
this is pretty off the page. I mean, if you look at the relief on this thing.
Exactly.
Oh my
Chuck,
God.
you've got it.
Three-dimensional.
This relief is an
3-dimensional.
incredible relief. It's almost,
Three-dimensional sculpture.
but it's, what is it? Almost 20 inches.
20 inches of relief. That is
relief.
insane.
But the result is that it pops each separate unit off the page and gives you your background, foreground.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
think it's a great rendering for
I think it's
the subject that
I
we
think
had
it's
at
awesome.
hand. You're entering the stage presentation here. I call this piece, with the Indian riding with his wealth displayed ahead of him, headed to the wedding, where he's buying this is his bride's price. And he's taking the horses to the wedding to buy his bride. Good one, isn't he?
Who came after that?
I don't know, the storyline.
That's a great story for that.
I like the.
Is this the same client as the sheep?
No,
No, this is a different
no.
client?
This was done years ago.
Yeah.
It's kind of stalled out here a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but not.
Yeah, the other damage, but that needs to be doweled on by.
Yeah.
So why do you have all this stuff here? I've never seen you have so much.
Well, because I had a gathering, a showing, so not only the piece that we were displaying, that's showing and unveiling, they got to see all this other stuff, so we had a talk through about this.
Oh, okay.
Telling them about my style and the fact that I love fluid movement, and I'm using the log, and this is a good example of the log being the tree.
Who's the little wood dipple there?
I love this one. I love all
I think
this.
she is just who she is.
Check this out, Ingrid.
Who's the little, I like the little, yeah.
Look at this. This is a whole different. Well, you like the
Yeah,
dances?
this one.
Oh yeah, she's
Well,
great.
She reminds me of Cassandra, with the butterflies on her.
Yeah, light. We have some light challenges in here, but still, I'm hoping that this will come through some form or fashion of degree.
Don't even know she's there.
Got a lot of backlight.
But I wanted to show you these.
Can you believe this guy?
And this is
Just
kind of like
nuts.
John and I's attempt at
Just totally
revitalizing our wood sculptures and making them a little more contemporary and edgy.
A lot of backlight, don't it? I'm hoping.
Edgy, exactly, you got it.
I like that. I like that.
Faceted surfaces,
I think
Yeah,
that's
that's like, like
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 you
tools,
are.
like, you know, how they cut a diamond or a ruby or whatever.
I haven't ever sold one yet.
Oh.
Oh, the one.
Yeah.
One.
and
Leslie.
Leslie, you didn't.
That was the first one I've done.
I hear this thing.
Do you like it?
Yeah,
Okay, like it is good.
definitely. But
Yeah, it's got enough three-dimensional normalcy to it that you know it's a heron,
yeah.
but the surface just bops free. So much worth the while for doing it.
What is that? Great herons or blue herons or?
Yeah, these are great blue herons, but we were just discussing that the finish is a faceted surface, which allows light to bounce off it in different angles, almost a prism, if you will, or a jeweled finish, where light shines off the different facets and just actually contemporizes the piece. Even though it's still anatomically herons, it has a surface that bounces a little differently. And the intent is not to duplicate nature, but to use nature as a background and augment it in such a way that it becomes art. Is that right, Ingrid?
Yep.
I'd say that's art.
Well, what do you think of that, Miss Ingrid?
I agree. I concur.
You concur.
I wanna know.
We have some
And so
concurrence
those are
here.
two pieces that have that faceted finish.
Yeah.
We have some concurrence. Okay, now we're gonna see
Ingrid approves.
we're gonna see the new piece.
I'm going to tell you the story of the tree first.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, this tree is over 100 years old. It's a maple tree, and we suspect in the storyline of the tree that it was actually planted by the pioneers when they first came out of over the Oregon Trail and settled in West Lynn and Oregon City. That was the first settlement. The first city in Oregon was Oregon City. And this tree grew right outside of Oregon City in West Lynn. And in the course of its history, it saw the whole western expansion as it grew old and into the tree it became. And so this tree actually was on the property of the Youth Music Project, which is a music school in West Lynn. And when the tree had to come down, they decided in their infinite wisdom that it needed to be turned into a sculpture. And the sculpture, because it was a music school, music was the theme. So we have now in front of us a great example of music in three different branches of music, which is rock and roll, pop, and country. And on top of that, we have the muses on top. But to digress for a moment, I had to come up with a title that encapsulated all of this that's going on. And I knew it had to be music. I knew it had to be certain things. And I wanted music to be in the title because music is the universal language. All humans and civilizations have had their own music. So I thought, universal language, what a great subject that the piece represented. But somehow that title left the tree out of it. And the tree, the gift of nature, the 100 years that it took to grow, is a significant part of this. So I have in the title, I started with one tree. This is one tree, literally. So the title begins with one tree. Now in the title of the tree, you presuppose that there's roots in the ground, and the roots of music, of course, are part of what the sculpture is. But that's the obvious. And then there's the branches of the tree. And the branches are great for pop and country. So in calling the sculpture One Tree, I've implied the roots, the branches, the limbs, the tree of life, the tree of music. So we don't need to state any of that. That's implied. So the end title is One Tree, Many Songs. And that's the title of the piece.
Wonderful.
So now let's go look at One Tree, Many Songs. Let's start at the bottom, because the tree grows from the top, the bottom, out of the roots into the bottom. The trunk grows up and supports what you see here now. And so fundamentally, for me, music is rock and roll. I grew up in the rock and roll era. It was throwing off the stereotypical music of the time, the 60s, with the revolution of youth. And what fed that revolution is rock and roll. So that, to me, anchored the piece. This is my rock and roll, and if you look at it closely, you can see the energy that rock and roll really is what it's all about. It's rebellion, the fist in the air, it's exuberance, this guy jumping up off the stage, singing and playing his guitar. Everybody's singing their song. It's the song that's the key here. And in this lower end, I got the keyboard player over here. I got the main electric guitar lead here. I got the drummer in the back, which gives the perspective. You know, you got the foreground, you got the background. Is that right, Ingrid?
Yep.
And then over here, you got the lead singer, and then the bass guitar player. That's the whole band represented in that little encompassed space. I represented the whole world of rock and roll. I got the electric amp here to show that it's contemporary, that these kids are running electric, and they're producing big sound. They're producing rock and roll in its core sensibility, and that's loud and that's impacting. And in order to create that and convey it, remember, I'm carving this thing with a chainsaw. And so the roughness is part of the creation process. And rather than sand all that creation process out, I left the chainsaw as the finish to convey the idea that music is being created in the moment. And it's not refined out and prissy. It's raw energy pumping out into the world and expressing the soul of the people that are creating it. And in order to convey that, I left the rawness of the chainsaw in the surface. And I love that in the piece. You love that, Ingrid?
Yes.
I love that the bass drum is a log, and I love that the butterfly bodies are notes.
That is so perceptive of you. We're going to get into that.
Okay.
The roses on the bottom kind of represent the rose city of Portland. Is that not true?
Yep. Yep.
But in addition, the yellow roses happen to be a family tradition of the client who ordered this.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ah.
Her family, her grandmother, that was the reason, you know, the supporting member of the music school, loved yellow roses. So this commemorates the grandmother of
Yeah.
Sally Banny, who was the co-creator of the youth music project in West Lynn. So that connects them to the piece and their family history. And then off we go. Now, Lovely mentioned the notes. Now, the notes on butterfly wings, butterflies are imagination. their creativity. They're transformational. They start as a worm and they end up these beautiful butterflies. Is that not right?
Yes.
And so music is transformational. So by tying the notes into the butterfly, I've taken the imagery of the butterfly and its transcendent nature and turned it through into the music. The thing moving the music up is imagination and inspiration, and that's the butterfly note.
Awesome.
So as we go up the trunk of the tree naturally splits into its branches. This is a tree, and trees have branches. So how more appropriate is it to create the branches of music that this school actually teaches? Rock and roll being the core, pop being one of their major players of their music line. And in order to convey pop, I got the Elton John glasses, and the kids are playing pop because the piano, and in this case, the keyboard, are a key element of pop music. And I got the red-haired girl playing the bass guitar, and around the side, I've got Native Americans, represented, playing the slide, and the bass guitar, and the keyboard, and the blacks part of it. And, it's just an ethnic merger of energy, which is what music is all about. And I love that little section. I love that little pop section because it's just so well done within the confines of the log itself. And I intentionally left the raw bark on the log to show that this primarily was a tree growing in nature. Ooh, 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 ooh. So as we go over on that's the left side. The right side, of course, is none other than country.
Excuse the background modulations.
And there is country personified. We've got the black player, which is really where the core of all music in America came from.
Yep.
We have the black playing the banjo. Now, the banjo was introduced by the black people coming from Africa. That is the original instrument. That and the drums, of course, they became the core beginning of American root music. So I wanted to make sure that was included. And I put him on a chair as though music started on the front porch. I mean, it started in the fields, let's face it.
Yeah.
The blues started in the fields, but as it meticulated and evolved, it became music on the front porch of the South.
As it was time to relax from the fields.
Yeah, exactly.
You
They
were on
came
the
and
front
played
porch.
their music. So that chair is indicative of playing music on the front porch. This is symbolism trying to convey the whole story. And with the banjo player, who's black, which is representative of that whole cultural infusion into American music, I have the fiddle player. Now there's an indication the fiddle player and the banjo player are equal in this rendering, and that fiddle player represents the Celtic influence. And the fiddle and the Celtic influence merged in America with the black blues music and really were the roots of country. So those two people combined were the onset of the whole genre of country music. And as we go on up, we get into a little more, electrified music, which is what we're doing today in the music world. So we got none other than Zach Brown on the main guitar there, the lead guitar. Zach Brown's playing with his cowboy hat. And we've got the bass player there. She's a female. And behind her is another player playing a mandolin. And on top, very uppermost piece on this side is none other than the robin, Rockin' Robin, singing to the music that's being produced. The original music is, of course, nature itself. So we've got universal language going over here on the countryside.
Are you gonna put all that down?
I guess so.
You're gonna have
Jacques
to.
putting it down right
who's
now.
the horsey coming below the robin? Who's that guy?
Well, he's just a country.
Hey, there's a little horsey.
He's just a country
Is it a
singer.
little horsey?
What?
No, under the robin is a horsey. Come on, am I?
Yeah, those are birds.
Those are birds. The robin's a bird.
Under the robin, above the guitar.
Which pointed out.
There's no horses.
There's a robin, and then there's the little animal that's
a
below
little bird.
the robin.
Those are little chicks.
Yeah.
Because West Lynn, where this piece will end up, was originally called Robin's Nest.
Oh, really?
So now we have the Robin's Nest being represented here.
Okay.
So again, going back to the core, we have these guitars that are flowing up the piece like as in dreamscape. And dreams are where a lot of inspiration comes from. In all parts of art, the dream process is the inspirational beginning of all sorts of art. And so I wanted to convey kind of a sense of dreaminess with these guitars. You can see they're bending and shaping themselves to the shape of the log, and they're playing themselves as in imaginative guitar playing. They're playing themselves, and that's moving up the trunk with the butterflies that have come and are, started with the lower piece. The butterflies are breaking loose and flowing up the piece, or depending upon your presentation, they're coming from the muses up above down to fuel the imagination of people going on after them. And so as you go up to the top, which is anchoring the whole piece, I have three big figures, and they are the dominant figures. Even though the tree itself is the dominant shape, on the tree, the three figures on top really are the big cheeses, and they represent the muses, the legends, if you will, and the muses that inspire others to come after them and make music. And so those three muses are none other than anchoring the piece on top is Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul,
Yeah.
and such a great creative force in American music. And along with her on the upper side is none other than Hank Williams,
All
the
right.
father of country.
Yeah.
And that he's depicted in his little, fringe cowboy outfits
Nice fringe.
and an acoustic guitar he's playing and his cowboy hat. Now on the third muse is a little bit different angle on things because she in herself is a legend, but she's a contemporary legend. And remember, this piece is going to be viewed and appreciated by kids that are now coming up and learning their music and their instruments by
she's their idol.
contemporary legends. So that is representing Taylor Swift, who happened to be nominated this year as the #1 influential musician of 2019. So I commemorated her, Taylor Swift, in one of the muses that go forward. So we have the father of country, the Queen of Soul, and we have Taylor Swift,
The Queen of Pop.
the Queen of Pop. Thank you very much. And she represents the pop side, Hank, the country, and Aretha is just representing all
All
that
of it.
music really is in its greatest sense.
Yeah.
And she is the Queen of Soul, and soul is the core value that all music represents and expresses. And so that is the piece.
Wow, that's really something. Skip, I want to thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack, for coming out.
Hey,
Jacques is the photographer and
well, I don't know about that, but this will go
the
down.
chronicler.
This will go down in prosperity, what do they say? Posterity. Anyway, you know,
Posterity.
future generations, and there'll be a lot of people that will never be able to see this piece, but through the visual aid of YouTube, they can now see.
Yeah.
And they can see the artist that created it.
And the artist rendering verbally of what he thinks he created. Now
And
each
your
person,
best friends.
That's pretty
and
awesome.
Your biggest fans. was
Ingrid and Lovely,
Ingrid and Lovely.
are here with us today,
Okay.
commemorating and
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed the
Yeah.
art of J. Chester Armstrong, a.k.a. known as Skip.
Yeah.
Skippy
Catch you a while
Angelo.
ago.